Hey folks, welcome back to Ndaba Africa. This is Chris once again. Well, does anybody take this guy seriously? Who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Dr. Fraud. Dr. Fraud. I'm sorry, perhaps you know him as Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's right, folks. The head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. That's right, Dr. Fauci. Finally, after a year of telling his fairy tales, fibs, and utter distortions of science and reality and data, now finally admits that perhaps a little humility is in line. Well, what am I talking about specifically? On Christmas Eve, he gave an interview in which he finally admitted that he has no idea what the hell he's talking about. What am I talking about specifically? The concept of herd immunity. Well, earlier this year, on the 10th of April, 2020, seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Back when we actually didn't know a whole lot about this virus because the Chinese Communist Party covered it up, tried to hide this virus's explosion into the population of Wuhan, China, and then lied, along with collusion from the World Health Organization and Dr. Tedros, lying to the public, telling us that it wasn't possible to transmit it human-human, that it was... Anyway, I'm not going to go into the World Health Organization. Let's talk about Dr. Fauci. So on the 10th of April, 2020, earlier this year, Johns Hopkins had this article published by Gypsy Amber D'Souza and David Dowdy, in which they discussed the concept of herd immunity. And they indicated in this, what many of us who follow epidemiology already knew, those who follow public health, knew that somewhere between 50 and 90% of a population need to have immunity in order to achieve what is known as herd immunity. Well, what is herd immunity, folks? Well, we need to talk about that. Herd immunity is achieved when enough people in a population have immunity to an infection. Now, we've seen in our past that in the United States, many diseases, infectious diseases like measles, mumps, polio, chickenpox, were all once very common in the United States. But all of them are quite rare this day and age. Why? Because either lifelong immunity to them and or immunization against them has led to a disappearance, by and large, of these diseases in the general population. That is what is called herd immunity. We achieved it so that it's a very rare situation rather than something that can explode across the population, like the introduction of the Black Plague, the bubonic plague, into Europe in 1349, devastating a population that has no immunity to it whatsoever, no natural immunity and no herd immunity built up. Well, that is what herd immunity is. So the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health experts indicated that somewhere between 50 and 90% of the population must have immunity against a disease like this in order to achieve herd immunity. Well, Dr. Fauci himself has said early in the year that his estimates early this year were that 60 to 70% of the population would need to be vaccinated in order to achieve herd immunity. Now, there's a little problem with this 60 to 70%. When people first started getting this virus and they knew little about it, they told us that once you had it, you had immunity. Well, that seemed odd, given that many viruses that mutate rapidly along this line, viruses like influenza, oftentimes give you only short-term immunity, usually less than a year. And then a new strain comes along and you can acquire the new strain of the virus and become ill again. So when they told us that you would get lifelong immunity from this early on, I was very skeptical. To hear scientists and medical practitioners tell us that those who had had COVID-19 and survived it had immunity. For how long? And for months they let us believe, by either not stating publicly the facts and telling people the truth about this or simply implying that it was true that you had immunity, that in fact you had immunity. Until suddenly Donald Trump came down with COVID-19. Wow. And then Donald Trump, in a matter of days, courtesy of remdesivir and world-class healthcare, kicked this virus's backside and recovered from it. Then suddenly doctors cautioned us that Donald Trump is not safe. He only has 4 months of immunity. 4 months. What's the basis of that? What data was involved in that? What scientific study led them to believe that? Did they find people who'd previously had COVID-19 and then were re-exposed to it 4 months later and got sick? People that 3 months later didn't get sick? People 6 months later got sick? Where does that come from? They're making this crap up as they go along. These people have become so untrustworthy as to beggar the imagination, folks. They can't tell us how much immunity you get from it, let alone whether any of these various vaccines, whether it's from Pfizer or from Moderna, actually confers immunity, and how long it confers immunity. The reality is that this is a rapidly mutating virus, as with many viruses, and we're likely to get only short-term benefits from a vaccination. As I mentioned, the flu lasts less than a year. You get sick again within a year. At best, getting sick from COVID-19 may give you immunity for a period of months. Is it 4 months? Is it 6 months? They don't know, and they're not honest enough or humble enough to tell us. Certainly not going to give you protection for years, let alone a lifetime. So what exactly are we accomplishing with these vaccinations? Are we going to have to get vaccinated every 90 days, every 6 months in order to stamp it out? Do they even have a clue what herd immunity is? Now, Dr. Fraud has revised his concept of what takes for herd immunity. And listen to why he did it here. So he says, Dr. Fraud, Fauci said on the 24th of December that we need to have some humility here. Well, it's about damn time you start expressing humility. But this isn't genuine humility. This jackass still acts like he knows everything and we're just a bunch of rubes. He told the New York Times, we really don't know what the real number is. Yeah, duh. And I told you that in February, March, April, May, June, July. You have no clue what will achieve herd immunity. You're just making it up as you go. I think the real range is somewhere between 70 to 90%, but I'm not going to say 90%. Why aren't you going to say 90%? If you think it's as high as 90%, why won't you commit to that? Are you afraid that your reputation will suffer? Your glorious, joyful, popular opinion of you, like the D.C. mayor declaring December 24th your birthday, Fauci Day? What a fraudulent situation. When polls said that only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%. Then when newer surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought, I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80, 85%. Oh, so you just decided with no scientific data. You're basing this on polls. Who are you, Bill Clinton? You're basing your decisions on policy based on polls? What if we call this a genocide? Will we lose the midterm elections? Susan Rice. Rwandan genocide, 1994. Is that how Fauci is deciding his policy based on polls? Unbelievable. Folks, the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases seem to be utterly clueless, making decisions based on politics, not based on science. And that's how this whole witchcraft, hysteria, and scam-demic has been playing out for nearly a year now. The World Health Organization itself has revised its description of what herd immunity is in the midst of this crisis. We've had the description of herd immunity for decades. It's guided science and medicine for decades, and they change it now. Why? Because they have no idea what the hell they're doing. The World Health Organization recently changed the definition of herd immunity. On June 9th of 2020, the WHO defined the term as indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through a previous infection. Well, there you go. That's a definition most of us have been working off of for decades. On November 15th, the World Health Organization changed that definition. Now, herd immunity, according to the World Health Organization, is a concept used for vaccination in which a population can be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached. Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Excuse me? Excuse me? That's bullshit. That's utter bullshit. If you get the measles, you never get them again. You thereby have immunity. You can't carry them and expose people to it. So vaccination is only part of the answer. Notice how they changed this for political reasons to force people, to induce people into taking vaccination. This is dishonest. This is fraudulent. Dr. Fauci talking about humility. This guy doesn't know what humility is. He's so full of his own press that he probably writes his own press releases each and every night before he goes to bed. Utter disbelief. This is what I have in this, folks. Now, in contrast to this, let's take a look at a University of Nottingham study, scientific study, an actual study, a model that they built, that was released on June 23rd of 2020, in which they factored in age and social activity into this model to determine what is necessary for achieving herd immunity. Well, they projected that you don't need 60% to achieve herd immunity against COVID-19, but rather just 43% of a population. 43%. They're factoring human behavior into this, which is a key component of herd immunity. If 18 to 20-year-olds all congregate on beaches for holidays, but 70-year-olds aren't doing that, they're socially isolated, maybe that plays a role. This model from the University of Nottingham in June of this year said that it's as low as 43%. Now, they caution people that 43% is not an accurate figure, but the point is that that model based 60% or less. And Dr. Fauci says, I can nudge it up a bit. I can nudge it up a bit. Folks, it's time to stop believing these witchcraft believers, these nonsensical non-physicians who claim to be physicians, who are trying to tell us how this stuff works when they have no idea whatsoever. Everything they've told us about this vaccination, about this virus, has been incorrect, and they have no humility. Now, after a year of lying to us or misleading us or simply just being stupid and getting it wrong, Dr. Fauci suddenly says, well, we need to have some humility here. Jack, you should have had humility in February. And you should have not contradicted the President of the United States when he followed your worthless advice, took your worthless recommendations, and then you betrayed the President and the National Coronavirus Task Force. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Shameful, disgraceful. This is the conduct we get, folks. Listen, this is not an anti-vaccination video. Not at all. Get the vaccination if you're at risk, if you can even get it. We already know that they are attempting to implement racist policies in this country in which they deny the vaccine to elderly white patients because of recommendations from morons at the New England Journal of Health Medicine. These people saying things like, well, the system has been set up to benefit white Americans and therefore they should not get it. People of color should get the vaccination first. Excuse me? That's not how you do business on the basis of skin color. You do it based on vulnerability. Those most vulnerable should get the vaccine first. This is insane. Science went out the window ages ago. These people are just making it up as they go. Everything they talk about. From how dangerous the virus, it kills 3.4%. No, it doesn't, folks. We know it kills less than 0.2% of those who come in contact with the virus and become infected. You have a 99.8% survival rate from this virus. And 85% of the people who die from it are people who have underlying health conditions that already compromise your immune system. Duh! Pretty simple to know who's vulnerable here. That's who you vaccinate. Get to it. The elderly and those with underlying health conditions. Get to it. Skin color has no bearing on this, you racist bigots. They're making policy based on social wokeness and on guesses. And then they tell us to wear diapers on our face because we're responsible for spreading it. Even though people stay at home, they wear the dumbass mask. They protect themselves. They isolate. They don't go anywhere. When's the last time anybody went to a sporting event? Or a prom? Or a dance? Or a nightclub? It just doesn't happen. Yet it's our fault that they're idiots and don't know their policy and can't separate science from policy to make sound policy decisions based on actual science. Dr. Fauci, well, I thought it was 60%, 70%. But now that I hear polls tell me that only 60% of Americans will go to get the vaccine, I think I can nudge it up to 85%. Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Fraud, why don't you nudge it up to 100%? Why don't you mandate a law and force us all to be tied down and get vaccinated simultaneously to end the virus around the planet? If you're so knowledgeable. Of course, we know that these vaccines are only 92 to 94 to 95% effective. So that means 5% of the people who get the vaccine are still going to get the virus. Well, there you go. That's a higher percentage of people are going to get the virus than those just walking around without any protection who are going to get it and die from it. Good Lord. Time for humility. Dr. Fauci, the time for humility was a year ago. Maybe the fact that you've spent 37 years as director at that location might be a sign you're past it, past your prime. And maybe your arrogance and selfishness in not relinquishing that post as director in 37 years, that speaks volumes about your ego, sir. Speaks volumes about your ego. As far as your competence, your public statements, which contradict every public statement you make, undermine your credibility. How anybody has confidence in this guy is beyond comprehension. Folks, if you can get the vaccination and you're comfortable with it, you should get it. We have to trust that these scientists and medical practitioners have developed vaccinations that are effective and not dangerous. I urge us to trust that. But this guy, Dr. Fauci, you shouldn't believe a word coming out of his mouth. He's a politician, not a scientist or medical practitioner. He surrendered those titles long ago. He is a politician. And he has told us falsehood after falsehood after falsehood. This is shameful, folks. Absolutely shameful. Herd immunity, now it's 90% to achieve herd immunity. And by the way, that vaccination will only give you protection for a few months. Getting sick will only give you protection for a few months. So what exactly are we achieving by this? Unless you can vaccinate the entire planet simultaneously, how do you anticipate wiping this out? And even if you do wipe it out, what's the reservoir? Is it bats? Is it chimpanzees? Is it varmints? Where is the vaccine? Where is the reservoir in nature? We don't even know. So we vaccinate everybody. We all get cured of it. And next year it comes right back because some bat bites somebody or droppings fall in somebody's food or whatever it takes. It comes back. We don't know. We don't know where Ebola comes from yet. This is idiotic, folks. Idiotic. Anything this guy says, you need to take with a grain of salt. Folks, if you're not a subscriber to Chris White Africa, consider becoming a subscriber by smashing that subscription button right down there. Be sure to toggle the bell icon to get notified of any updates. Feel free to leave a comment. Abusive comments will be deleted. And ask that you smash the like button because likes drive viewership, and we're looking for viewers to spread the word. Anyway, again, not an anti-vaccination video, not a COVID denial video, simply exposing the lack of humility by a man feted by the glitterati and the elites, who seems to have no clue what he's talking about and constantly changes his story. Why anybody has confidence in him is beyond comprehension. Anyway, folks, God bless and have a good day.